Thank you, everyone. We have the Harbour Quays and Route to Bus Priority Project briefing, and Liam is here to introduce it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kia ora, councillors. How are you? Yeah, I'm a bit full of flu myself at the moment, but I'm on the up now. No, I'm all clear. I'm pretty good. So, hey, February 25, we spoke to you last about this project. You'll know this project sits both with Greater Wellington Regional Council as the Public Transport Authority and WCC being the Road Controlling Authority. There's $16 million shared in both long-term plans to get these two projects up and running, and this is an update briefing for you. We're rapidly working on the draft business case that will bring for you an adoption hopefully in August, and with that the traffic resolution, so the detailed design. Now in February we presented two options. We've now got a finalised option for you to talk to today, and we've got the team with us. So Vida, Hamish, Sam Gaines' team, and Tamsin, of course, who's now back working for Greater Wellington Regional Council, and Paul Barker will take you through some of the detail. I'm just going to take you through some context, and I'll rush through these. These slides were sent out, I think, Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon. Sorry, they should have gone out Thursday. We'd had a little hiccup in the DEM Services meeting agenda, but we also have Greater Wellington Regional Councils. They got these slides on Thursday. So this isn't a marriage of inconvenience, this is a marriage of convenience. We are working hand in hand with Greater Wellington Regional Council. As I said, they are the Public Transport Authority. They need some additional bus capacity. And back in February, we explained that Courtney Place Golden Mile is at capacity or not or close to. And we have talked for some time, particularly through Let's Get Wellington Moving, this idea of a second spine. We currently have a single spine running through the city for public transport, and that's taking 70,000 passengers a day crossing the city through the CBD. And the PTA have said to us, look, we really need to improve efficiency. We'll start to suffer in customer experience and travel times, and so we've worked on the second spine together. That's in conjunction, of course, with Greater Wellington's more broader role in the region and having long-term rapid transit options across the region to get people in and out of the city and across the city easier. We are keeping in mind as we work on these joint projects the NZTA Waka Kotahi State Highway 1 tunnel and congestion charging issues. You may have already realised, but I've sent an email about an hour ago inviting you to a Waka Kotahi briefing. I apologise for the 3rd of July and the recess period, but they are running along some very strict timeframes of their own, so they've offered to brief councillors in their offices on the 3rd of July, and we'll send out a calendar invite shortly about how those roads of national significance projects are going, in particular the state highway upgrades, Terrace Tunnel, etc. I don't know, I can check with you on that. It is in their whare, so they'll be their whare rules. We'll find out for you. Of course, we've got lots of stuff happening too. We're looking at this as a holistic network, whether it's the finish and completion of the Hutt Road, Thorn and Quay improvements, the Golden Mile, of course, more so the Courtney Place upgrade and the Central City upgrades around Dixon Cube. It's all part of the mix. And there's been some questions from councillors as well regarding the cross-city cycle connections as well. And importantly, the harbour side cross-city connections. We'll provide a bit more advice on that today as well through Paul's team. Good strategic context here, Regional Land Transport Plan, our own LTP, in particular urban form and livable connected communities. It all relates to moving more people with fewer vehicles and transforming our transport system. The idea of making public transport convenient and frequent is all about how good cities roll, and we're going to continue to try to press on you that that needs to be an investment into the future. This is the rough timeline. We started back in the day, didn't we, talking about Golden Mile issues and short-term improvements. This was Greater Wellington raised them as issues. We're doing that now, as you know, but we're also establishing a Harbour Quays second spine project and a Route 2 connections out to east, which is the detail of what we're talking about today. The council briefing itself in February outlined where we got to on those two options, and today we're presenting the preferred option back to you. And then, of course, we've got in June some additional we've got the additional briefing today, and in August the council's looking to hopefully endorse the draft business case. So we would then take that out with the design detail around the traffic resolutions, consult on those with the community, find out whether in fact we can make any changes based on submissions, and then adopt the TRs and start to implement the construction later on early next year, 2026. A couple of things popping, and I wanted to touch on this. There's no question, councillors, that carrying 70,000 passengers through the city a day is no mean feat. And the need for a second spine is quite well regarded by most transport experts in the city. We are trying to be very clear with you here that this project is proposing changing 2 of the 6 lanes on the quays to peak hour bus lanes. Okay, and yes, there's going to be network disruption, and yes, there will be impacts, I suspect, but I think the positives far outweigh the negatives on this one, and I'll walk through those quickly. I mean, obviously there's an opportunity to reduce congestion on Golden Mile, but we're also putting a new public transport spine on some pretty important key locations across the city, including Te Papa, Tākina, Queen's Wharf, Tanako Square. They're all part of the project mix. They're all part of trying to get people back in and more permeably travelling through the city. There will be a couple of destination stops there, as I've mentioned, and the route itself, we think in the first initial period will carry about 30 buses an hour, and as the city grows, possibly around about 60 by 2034. So as an introduction, I'll leave it there. I'll hand it over now to Tamsin and Paul, if you want to come and get the clicker, and I'll hand it to the team to take you through the part 1 and part 2 update.
Sorry. Yep. Kia ora, councillors. Good to see you again. Here's the scope of the project, which I believe I've introduced you in the past as not a flood map, but just talking about the area we're trying to move the buses through. With, as you can see, a lovely winter picture of the Harbour Quays there. So this is, as Liam was saying, we're talking about the wider central city network and how to move people through it efficiently. So this just gives you that context of this portion of the corridor. So Golden Mile in gold, as you can see, obviously, with its existing stops. And the proposed route for Harbour Quays is the red dotted line that you've got there, and an indicative line for the Cross Harbour cycleway, which obviously will come up separately for you. So it gives you that collective view of all the corridors there, just in terms of how we'll move the traffic through this fairly congested space. So a bit of detail behind the point that Liam was making about the fact that this is not a problem for the future. This is a problem today. As with all of these pictures, red bad, green good, and we're in the red and orange space in terms of current volumes travelling down the Golden Mile. So that AM peak north, which is Courtenay Place to the station, we're already running at over 100 buses in that peak time, and the optimum capacity for the traffic to move well with the buses at reliable journey times without queuing and platooning and so on is 80 an hour. So we will immediately see benefits by moving some of the traffic, the bus traffic, from the Golden Mile across to Harbour Quays. A little bit different in the south, in the southbound morning peak, obviously coming in the other way, but again you'll still see sitting absolutely on the cusp of that optimum capacity. And again in the evenings still well over 80, and demand is not dropping. So if anything, those numbers would increase. And you can see in the bottom table there in 2034, without using Golden Mile, without using Harbour Quays, Golden Mile becomes critically overloaded with about 130 buses an hour. And at that point, the wall of buses is a constant feature along there. Journey times very unpredictable, certainly longer. Speed of the buses dropping to about 3 to 6 kilometres an hour, so taking 28 minutes to move along the Golden Mile, which is not appealing to patrons. You'll find it quicker to walk to the station. As I say, the ideal maximum is that 80 buses an hour. So that's what we're looking to try and achieve with Harbour Quays. Harbour Quays won't fix the whole network. We will still have pinch points on Willis and Manners Street. So this is, an intervention into the wider network. We can't fix the whole network with this project. But it does give us some opportunities. A faster journey for those services that would otherwise take longer along a congested Golden Mile, moving them onto the Harbour Quays. The Brandon Street services, they're a legacy from the 2018 changes, were introduced to address some of the congestion along Lambton Quay. So this will give us the opportunity to extend those services currently terminating at Brandon Street across the wider central city. As Liam said, this is a corridor that will open up access to the waterfront with stops at Queen's Wharf, Waitangi Park, Takina, Te Papa, Post Office Square. We'll look at the stops in detail on another slide, but it really does create that connection to the waterfront from a public transport perspective. Same with the Airport Express, which is a very popular service, but also being able to use that to drive some demand for that service at Te Papa and Takina. As I say, takes pressure off the Golden Mile and gives us that chance to start looking at how we can activate the pedestrian integration and activity in that Harbour Quays space, integrating and connecting the CBD and the waterfront. But with every opportunity, of course, we get challenges and constraints. The first one I need to point out is that you'll remember in September last year when the National Land Transport Fund didn't deliver the funding that we were looking for. And this was originally a $50-something million project. And without the NZTA contribution, we pulled it right back to $10 million. And there is a limit to what you can do with $10 million. So it does create some constraints on just how much infrastructure we can put in place here. So some of the challenges that we've got, our central city bus passengers are very sensitive to change. So in terms of moving people from a Lambton Quay corridor that they've been using for a while and getting them to cross the lanes to the Harbour Quays is a challenge that we're very aware of and really beginning to think about in terms of how we manage that. There are perceptions from a customer point of view that the harbour is exposed in a heavy traffic area, and one of the comments we got recently from one of our public transport advisory group meetings was it's really not a human scale. So in terms of those bigger objectives for the city and for activating the networks and improving the urban form, we can't do a lot with $10 million. But it does lend itself to, here's a start to look at what those future opportunities for investment might be. And this isn't about moving all the buses off the Golden Mile. This is about getting the right balance between the two corridors. If we reduce the number of buses on Lambton Quay, for example, too much, you won't have the pedestrian activity on Lambton Quay that you need to keep that environment thriving and people moving through it. Spending the money, using the retail, hospitality outlets and so on. So what we're looking at, and we'll talk about it more, is more about how we address that peak volume on the Golden Mile. Constraints, so yep, $10 million, as I say, doesn't give us an enormous budget to work with. And it's likely that that will be most obvious in terms of the quality of the shelter that we can provide. We're not talking anything other than our standard Metlink shelters here, but it is an exposed area. We may find that this is a space where we have to compromise in terms of just how much shelter we can provide within the budget for this first stage. We've also got some of those physical constraints that you'll be well aware of around Waitangi Park and the Schaefer's New World area in terms of how the lanes work in that space. Paul will talk to you some more about that. And just the last point there, as I said, we don't want the bus volumes on the Golden Mile below about 50 buses an hour. This is likely to be a service that is really unlikely to be used by customers in our central city zones 1 and 2. We're talking about peak services, we're talking about express services, benefits for people from suburban areas coming into the city, being able to get across the city. It's that movement to and from the station and the end of Courtney Place that we're focusing on, but obviously this is all part of a wider network. And moving the 70,000 people through the central city is the focus of what we're trying to achieve here. So just referring back a little bit to the conversation we had with our public transport advisory group, faster bus journeys are absolutely the reason people would use this, particularly at peak times. It was a really rewarding conversation with the group in terms of, we didn't prompt them with anything about what the benefits were. These came up spontaneously through the conversation, so it was really good to hear that one coming through, as that's, it's the assumption we've predicated this whole thing on, which is reliability and speed. Lower journey times are the things that will encourage people to use these services. Yes, we know there is an expectation around the quality of shelter at these stops, so that was and is quite a high priority for bus users. We heard about the need to make sure that access and accessibility are properly considered in terms of getting across those lanes of traffic. And Paul will talk about how we manage that with signal times and crossings and so on, all in that context of how do we still manage to maintain movement across the whole of the network. And that the other rewarding one to hear spontaneously from the group was about opening up access to the waterfront, which, showing people this for the first time, was a really obvious benefit that they could see. So as Liam said, when we talked to you back in February, we showed you the 2 options that we'd brought the list of 10 original options down to. We went through another multi-criteria analysis of these 2, and on the aspects that were considered in that about the impact on buses and customers and journey time reliability and so on, as well as the legibility in terms of how to move people across to a route on the quays. The option on the right, the Harbour Quays option, which has traffic in both directions moving along the quays only, outweighed the Featherston Street Harbour Quays split route on every aspect except for that pedestrian quality of access to the Harbour Quays. So we're very confident that this is the best route that we're working with. So that preferred route, as you can see, if we start on the left-hand end, west from the station, travels down Whitmore Street, along the quays, past Frank Kitts Park, and then follows up Cable Street, which of course is only one way, and then the connection back in the other direction is down Wakefield Street, and then joining the quays again at Harris, is it, at that point? Almost. So that's the preferred route that we've worked out. The stops are indicated on there. You can see that they're sitting within that acceptable or recommended standard of a 4 to 5 minute walk between the stops. We've been really mindful about how to see the connections across the 2 corridors, Harbour Quays and Golden Mile, as well as just along the Harbour Quays in terms of the distances. So you can see that obviously we took those stops on the right-hand end at Te Papa and Wakefield Street, Takina. We're, of course, got to work with the network that's there, and the traffic flow is going only in one direction. So you can consider Te Papa and Wakefield Street as a pair of stops. And the connection between the two is obviously thoroughfare through Takina. So that's when I'd say that we've got opportunities to drive some demand for these stops here, and in terms of visitor attractions and promoting the use of public transport as a way to get to services and facilities and attractions, and not just for commuter travel. You'll see when I talk about the type of services we're talking about, then some of that all-day use of those stops we can start to encourage with the first step of the services we're talking about here. So slightly complicated slide here, but the point we want to get across here is that we're talking about, for our first set of services to move onto this corridor, the express services and possibly an all-day service running up the harbour side. So one of the things I've been unable to completely grasp in my head since I went to Metlink is that everybody talks in route numbers. So if I sat here and said to you the 30X, the 32X and the AX, yeah, that would, yeah. So hence the number of words on this slide. So the 30X is the one that goes from Moa Point to Scorching Bay. Moa Point and Scorching Bay, sorry. 31 from Miramar North, 32X from Houghton Bay, 38X from Strathmore Park. And this is what I mean about the services being attractive to travellers, passengers coming into the city to work from the suburbs. The Hospital Express and the Airport Express, both popular services. Hospital Express is very targeted in terms of time. Airport Express runs every 15 minutes and is proving to be a very, very popular service. I spoke about Brandon Street, and this is an opportunity for us to extend the services which used to terminate there, or would currently terminate there, turn those into express services out to Mairangi, Kandala and Karori. So those will be the ones working to the west. And in terms of a service running all day along the harbour, it could be the 24, it could be a different service. We just, that's an example of what we might be able to do. So Mapuia currently comes down round Oriental Bay, and currently goes along the Golden Mile, but could go along the waterfront. We haven't made a decision on that. It's just an example of what we might be able to do to provide that all-day access along there.
Sorry, they've finished the briefing?
No, I haven't. I've got more to go.
Maybe.
Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. I've got a couple more slides, and then Paul's got a bit to talk about.
It's probably about
Yep. Yep.
Well, yeah. We've got until 3:30, Councillor.
Sorry.
So the important point on this slide is that we're not talking about doing everything all at once. I showed you the numbers that show how congested the Golden Mile is. What we're looking at is a staged implementation here with a first phase. As I say, this slightly harks back to the reduction in the budget, because there's a limit to how much infrastructure we can provide with the $10 million. But equally, learning from 2018, we don't want to make a big shift of services all at once, because we do know there's a customer education, behaviour change activity that we need to manage really well here. And working with the peak services, which is where we currently have the congestion problem, and being very targeted about the ones that we put through there first, is the first stage of what we think will need to happen over the next 10 years as demand continues to grow, the city's network continues to flow. Moving into the later stages, if we move more services onto this route, we'll need a bit more investment. As I talked about, we don't have a great deal of money to invest in bus shelters, but putting further services down there and making this a much more active corridor for PT, we need to think also about movement and the shade and shelter it will take to get people to use that corridor more. All of that public realm improvement is outside the scope of this project at the moment, but you would need to be looking at some of that for the future as this becomes a much busier corridor. So the impact on the volumes for our preferred option, as I can see, the red boxes previously moved to green. So that first one, AM Peak North, 75 on Golden Mile, because we'll move 30 services across to Harbour Quays. And the southbound peak, 68, because we'll move 34 of them across to Harbour Quays. That's the way to read those tables. And phase 2, you can start to see we're still keeping at an optimum capacity for the Golden Mile, but moving more services onto Harbour Quays. I'll hand over now to Paul, and he can talk about the Road Controlling Authority side of this.
Thanks, Tamsin. Good afternoon, councillors. As both Tamsin and Liam outlined, Wellington City Council is the road controlling authority here, and clearly a partner on the project, but we have some responsibilities to set the road up, and how we go about it, I'll just talk through. So we have talked here about that service design that the Regional Council have undertaken, or Metlink have undertaken, and we've reflected the numbers there in those bottom two lines of the graph on the left. So on day one, we put this in. This will become the busiest public transport corridor outside of the Golden Mile, busier than anything we're seeing through Newtown, busier than Thornton Quay when that starts on day one. So there will be busy lanes carrying buses. When we looked at prioritising those left lanes, we looked at options for special vehicle lanes, whether bus lanes, bus-only lanes, T2 or T3 lanes. Given the peak nature of the lanes, that only justified a peak time intervention, and it was thought there that a bus lane is the appropriate restriction to put through there at the peak times. Now, the peak times loosely are described as 7 to 9 and 4 to 6, but we've got a lot more work to do just to define the shoulders of those peaks, and it might well be that it's instead of 7 to 9, it's 7 to 9:30, and that's the types of things that we'll bring back to you in the business case, then we'll take out for consultation. The bus stops that Tamsin's described, the 12 pairs of stops, effectively are all inline bus stops. So the impediment that they will provide to general traffic travelling in that left lane of the quays is really going to dictate the use of that left lane. The bus lane restriction sends the signal that this is a multimodal corridor, and at peak times we are, as a city, providing that shift towards public transport and prioritising that through this corridor. The effect, though, is not much different than what the stops themselves are going to provide. Equally, in that left lane, particularly in the northbound left lane, the left turning vehicles filter, so that's they turn through the pedestrians that have the green signal. So at every intersection, the left turning vehicle is stopping that left lane being used as a through lane. So between the in-lane stops and the left turners, we're not seeing much progression in that left lane now. And we'll see less with the stops. And so the bus lane itself, while it provides that restriction, isn't going to impact overly. Going to the next slide. So looking at where the bus lanes would be, you can see we'll start with the southbound through Cable Street, starting back at Whitmore Street. We're not proposing to have any restrictions at this stage in Whitmore Street. There's just not the lanes available to dedicate to a dedicated bus lane. There's only 2 in each direction, and we think that it would have an undue effect on general traffic. But it still has in-lane bus stops. So there will still be an impediment to general traffic flow through Whitmore and prioritising the buses at the stops. Within the quays themselves, so starting at the Whitmore Street wharf gates, there by the Bell Gully, we would commence the bus lane and then have that flow right through to Cable Street. It's got a Te Papa stop, and then somewhere between the Te Papa stop and the intersection of Oriental Parade, the bus will need to move from the left lane out to the middle lane to be able to then make the right turn into Kent Terrace. we're proposing at this stage, as shown on here, that we would put in a signal or take the bus lane up to Chafer Street, put in a B phase. So it's an opportunity for the bus to jump from the left lane to the middle lane, as we do currently at Kent Terrace at the southern end. It allows the Newtown bus to get from the left bus lane across into the middle lanes to head to Newtown. Northbound, shown on here, is a dedicated bus lane from Courtney Place. On reflection, we probably look to start that near Blair Street, but that's some of the detail we're still working through. And I say Blair Street, we've got the traffic signals just around the corner with the mid-block signals across to New World. So those orange lanes would be those peak bus lanes in both directions at both peaks. Thinking about the parking impact that we may have. So I'm going to start on the right-hand side of the page. The furthest blue circle is on Kent Terrace, and that's for the bus stop that's between the Embassy and Elizabeth Street. There is already a peak, or a school bus stop in the evening, or afternoon school bus stop, and it's got loading zones. So there's a little bit of a parking rearrangement there, and there would be a loss of car parks for that stop to be accommodated. The one on Cambridge Terrace is between Courtney Place and Wakefield Street, opposite the Welsh Dragon Bar. So we'll keep the loading zone outside the Hannah Playhouse, but from the northern end of that Hannah Playhouse, their loading dock, the rest of that length would be a bus stop. So there's a bit of general parking has to be removed for that. And then along Wakefield Street, the blue circle there indicates the length between Tory Street and the Reading car park. So that's our new Takina stop. And all parking there would be removed. To accommodate the bus there, we'll pull the curb out a little bit. So while it's a parking lane now, the new bus stop will actually be almost an in-lane stop. Now, those other two blue circles we're still working on. So the stop at Post Office Square, we're looking to where to accommodate the shelter. It's a heritage area. We have some constraints about the impact on general pedestrian flow through Post Office Square. And there may be an opportunity there where the angle parking that's almost opposite Panama Street, so if you come down Panama, thinking where it joins Custom House, that angle parking may need to be removed to accommodate a bus shelter clear of the pedestrian zone. And then up at the northern end of Custom House Quay, we're proposing to put the stop outside the new Deloitte building in that block, and that can be accommodated there with shelter under the verandas. But we're just looking to whether it would better serve the network if it was one block to the north between Brandon Street and Balance Street. And if it was in that block, we would have to lose some parking to accommodate it there. So at this stage, we're not proposing that, but by the time it comes back to you with a business case, it may well have changed, and we've moved Deloitte one block north. Overall, there's about 30 car parks that will be affected through this. So next step. So essentially, we've gone live today. This is it. We've not been able to talk with key stakeholders and key members of the community that might be affected by this. The veil's off. The website goes live today, so people will be able to find out more information about the project. Clearly, this presentation is in public. We're all go now with the business case. We've been doing. We've done some modelling to date on some previous assumptions around the bus volumes. Now that we've got the new service design, as the service design that Tamsin's outlined with pretty much just dealing with the peak and not a lot of flow into peak, that service design is now being modelled. We need to turn that round very quickly to be able to finish the economic case, to complete the draft business case, to get it to you in essentially 4 weeks' time. So there's an awful lot of work that the project team have got to do to get it to you, but the intent is that the papers available for the 7th would be circulated on the 1st of August. So we've got 4 weeks of a lot of work to do. We will be seeking approval of that draft business case and approval to consult. We'll then take that consultation out to the wider community with the traffic resolutions for the bus stops, traffic resolutions for the bus lanes, and the times for those bus lanes and the extent of them, and then bring it back to this council and whichever committee would be dealing with traffic resolutions at the time. We're proposing that comes in February and it gets signed off. Once that's signed off, we can then complete the business case. So we're not asking you to sign off the business case until it comes back from the consultation with the community. In parallel to that, we're also talking with our partners in this at the Regional Council, so we're briefing them on Thursday. We tried to get this as a joint briefing. Unfortunately, both councils are very busy at the moment, so we've had to brief them separately. And again, we'll be taking all of those papers back through the other council as well. Construction would commence after we've got committee sign-off to the traffic resolutions, and we're looking to introduce the new route at the beginning of next summer. And deliberately, that summer thought that it's a good time to get people thinking about walking that extra couple of blocks across to the stop. Now, the result. So we did have in our slides that that there is no option but to do this. Now, of course, there is an option. We don't have to do this. As Road Controlling Authority, we have options. But the case is compelling if we were to do nothing. The impact upon the network of not creating a second spine through the city and just relying on the one primary spine is going to not only cripple the public transport network, it has flow-on effect to the general traffic network. The flow-on to the edges that the quays themselves would be start to degrade as a result of buses being congested along the primary spine. So we need to do something through there. The initial modelling on the previous service design shows that it would be a significant saving. So those peak services that are currently on the Golden Mile, when they move across to the Harbour Quays corridor, they're potentially between 2 and 6 minutes faster by moving those across. And then by taking them off the Golden Mile, those that we leave on the Golden Mile would still be able to go 1 to 3 minutes quicker than what they currently do. So there's a benefit to both lots of buses, not just those that we move. So the customer experience is great. The benefit I saw, and I sat through the work that the Regional Council were doing around the service design, is that we provide that choice to the customers. So on a wet day, at the end of the day, to go across to catch that express service, if a customer felt that it wasn't appropriate to walk across from Lambton Quay across to the quays and across 6 lanes of the quays, they could still stay on the Golden Mile. There would still be a bus going to each one of those destinations. It's just not the express bus. So every suburb will be served by a regular bus that uses the Golden Mile or an express bus that uses the Harbour Quays. So we provide that choice. And that would be the case in both Phase 1 and Phase 2. So that'll see us through to 2034. So the network that we're designing will be able to cater for that right through then. When we move to Phase 3, I think we'll be back around the table looking at opportunities, the learnings that we've been able to take from the first phase, whether we need more shade and shelter to and from the stops, whether we need more shade and shelter at the stops, and whether the stop locations are in the right place. We can do that again at Phase 3, so 2034 out. But the proposal that we've got to is going to see us through for the next 10 years.
Very good.
That's it. Thank you.
So we'll pause and then go to questions and then hit Route 2 after questions finish on this one. Yep, thank you.
Yeah, we've probably got 15 minutes on Route 2 presentation and then questions on that.
So I understand from Cycle Wellington they really want road space, not bits of the waterfront for the cycle access-way path. Are you able just to talk about what the plans are for the cycleway around there?
Cool. I'm happy to. Look, you going to go, Vet? Cool. So when we've looked at options for bikes along the quays, the bus lane option allows for bikes. So there's no prohibition on bikes using the quays. It's not a dedicated lane as Cycle Wellington obviously are asking for. If we were to go back, and I won't go back, one of those first slides showed the cross-city bike connection from Thornton Quay through to Oriental Parade. So we are planning a high-quality connection that's not the shared path along the waterfront, and it's not on the quays. So we're looking to get something along the road side of that corridor.
So it's the road side, not the road?
Correct, yeah. So it's not the harbour side of the corridor.
Okay, maybe take that offline. The bridge. So I guess it's just a question about coordination between this project and the Tanako one, where there has been agreement to bring down the bridge and it's going to become a major pedestrian crossing. How does that then work in with having a faster commute route? And we've asked this before, but I think we're still just not quite getting how those two things are working in together.
Well, look, the project team are reasonably agnostic around that decision there. We have a mid-block crossing currently from the Michael Fowler across to the St John Bar. So there is a crossing there that interrupts traffic flow. But that interruption of traffic flow happens in the shadow of the signal settings back at Taranaki Street. So thinking about vehicles that are leaving Wakefield at Taranaki and heading down the Quays, they are platooned back at there by the settings of the signals. So the downstream effect of that, we can cross the road in the shadow of those signals. Equally, the southbound traffic has the same, in that we have some gaps in the traffic that allows for pedestrians to cross at St John and Michael Fowler. If that was relocated further along to under the current bridge or replicated further along, so we may have two crossings there, the modelling would suggest that it would have very little effect, if not no effect, on the throughput of vehicles through there, because you're driven off that cycle length at those big intersections.
Just my last question for now around resilience, around sea level rise. Is this sort of, you're thinking more of this as a short-term, medium-term measure? Or are you hoping that there will be resilience built into that side of the harbour?
So for the project budget of 10 million, resilience for building longevity was out of scope.
I mean, are you thinking about the resilience challenge? I'm not saying you're going to use that money to make it more resilient.
Yes, we are. Yeah.
The 16 million, which is for both projects, I know. So what's the funding split between the city and the regional council?
50-50.
Okay. And then I saw at a very early slide that the regional council looks after the bus corridors outside of Wellington City. Is that totally paid for by the regional council if it's outside of Wellington City? That was in one of your early slides.
It's part of the bus priority action plan. So yes, those are GW projects.
But not paid for 50-50 with any other TA?
No, not paid 50-50, no.
Kia ora, councillors. I'm Samantha Gain. I'm the GM of Metlink. So the other bus priority work that we might do in other territorial authority areas, we do with the relevant territorial authority, and depending on what it was, then we would work out how that would be funded.
Okay, thank you. And can I ask about the shelters? Now, that was a bit unclear to me as to whether there was always going to be some kind of shelter. I know you talked about the quality of the shelters, but I'm worried in case there's zero shelter.
No, there won't be zero shelter. In some places, we've got canopy cover from the buildings. In other places, as Paul mentioned, like Post Office Square, we'll need to provide a shelter. So there won't be any places where we're expecting people to stand in the open weather. There will be shelter. We've designed it around, in terms of some of the locations for the stops. We've chosen them because of the shelter that's there already.
Good idea, especially if it comes to taking out even more car parking, which is obviously difficult. And the last one is about the Lambton interchange. So that I'm just asking about because I haven't had a chance to get an update on it. So we approved in this council some sort of scheme whereby there's a building being built down there, and I saw it's demolished. Does anyone remember this?
Yes.
Siobhan brought it to us.
Mr. Chairman, that's the Kate Shepherd redevelopment.
And I would like to know, just because I saw it on the
Sam,
diagram.
you okay to talk to that, and anyone from...
What's happening? Because we did some amendment which meant that you could build a more suitable bus interchange there.
Yeah, so my understanding of that is the redevelopment of the Kate Shepherd site is the Wellington City project, which has been, the design of which has been modified to allow more buses effectively to be underneath it, like in the interchange. So my understanding is that's where the design sits, but the project is not proceeding very quickly.
No, I think I can't recall the developer on that site, but it's being delayed due to the economic conditions, I suspect.
Can we have an update on that? Because we did make some commitment, and I can't quite remember what it was. And where
That's right, it was quite a complex deal. So
Yeah,
which
can we have an
benefited Greater
update,
Wellington,
please?
so
Because
I
it's
will
been
do.
about 2 years, probably.
Yep,
And
I'll
yeah.
send an email around.
Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you. My question is just around the construction period and just in line with Golden Mile, so just being mindful of the city being choked up, like what does that look like and have we modelled it?
Yep, and from my perspective, we're looking at how we manage the disruption of services to the buses. So yes, we are very much aligned in terms of how we manage that much disruption all at once. Whatever degree of traffic management we need, but yeah, we will need to move bus services for the duration of construction periods, and yep, that planning is happening.
I've got a couple of questions. First one is about making public transport more convenient and bus shelters. So you're talking about areas where there's no canopy cover, etc. But what are you doing about the bus stop that you are moving that was to just near the embassy in Courtney Place? So it's going to be moved along where there was no shelter, and we've been told there's no money to build a shelter there. And yet after film festivals and events at the embassy, you can have literally hundreds of people gathering there.
This is the one on the
It's on the Miramar side.
Terrace side?
Yeah, Kid Terrace on the Mount Victoria side.
There will be shelter. Yes, we won't have any stops where there is no shelter.
Well, that's fantastic because that's completely against what we've been told. So thank you. That's good.
So that would be the stop that pairs with the existing end of Courtney Place stop.
Yep.
So that would be you can see there, I've just brought up the slide, that the little dot to the very right of the page. Yeah, so that's on Kent Terrace, and that's the one I said was between the Embassy and Elizabeth Street.
Yes.
So
yes.
at the moment, it's a part-time bus stop now with no shelter.
Yes. But you have the Embassy canopy, of course, which people do use as the shelter.
This will be quite a bit further to the south than the Embassy.
And what about for the pedestrian crossing?
That's out of scope for this, but there is shelter going in for the new pedestrian crossing that's been built as part of the Golden Mile.
We were told there wouldn't be any money for that.
Okay, all right. I'm looking.
We can get back to you on that. Yep. We don't have Sharon and her team here today, but we'll
and
follow
also
up on that.
Councillor Pannett, who's keenly interested. So the second one is the inline bus stops. So in Britain, the Transport Secretary is considering banning them due to their safety concerns. Are we doing anything about that over here?
I need more information on why they're banning them and what the issue is that they're trying to fix.
As people who are disabled with sight, vision problems, etc. There's been quite a lot about it in the papers.
Oh, for an inline bus stop, or you?
For inline bus stops.
Okay.
I'll send it to you.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Can you go back to slide 8? That was the previous, that one there. No, the previous one before that, the original map one.
That one.
No, before that. That one. So I just noticed there that there's bus stops on, it says Courtney Place, but it's actually Taranaki Street, I guess. Oh no, where it says Courtney Place, is those bus stops staying? Were they, what other, along the Golden Mile? Along Courtney Place? Was that?
So Tamsin made it clear that is the existing arrangements along the Golden Mile.
Oh, sorry, I was hopeful. In terms of converting peak time traffic lanes to bus lanes, I know that there's going to be flow-on effects if we don't do this, but there's also flow-on effects if we do this. And what is going to be the traffic impact for removing a third of the traffic capacity along the quays, given this is the biggest arterial that we have in the city?
So that work is being done, and as I said when we're finished, that the design team now have got a challenge to try and get this all wrapped up before it comes back to you in August. The impact of general traffic will be part of that work, but there will be an impact. And I think when Mr. Hodgetts outlined that when he started, this will have an impact, but the benefits there to the public transport and those 70,000 users are going through would outweigh any disbenefit to the motorist. The other is it reinforces the primary transport corridor through the city being through the state highway. So we really want to work this together with the connections at the south, so that the Harbour Quays stops becoming our only primary route for motorists, because I think when we look at our hierarchy, the state highway should serve that function. And it's currently being served along the quays when it ought to be served to the south of the city.
Ought to be all it likes, but there's only one lane heading south on the state highway, and there's 3 lanes on the quays. I mean, so I'm just saying
it will have an impact. I don't think we're trying to hide.
So can
the degree to which that will be outlined in the business case.
Oh, sure, but so can we have that information early? Because I just see this as, to be pretty honest, to be a showstopper around this, and so when will that traffic impact assessment be completed? I know we're going to get it at the business case, but that's when we have to make a decision. And yet us as elected members and the public, who are going to be affected, so you need to see the logic and the of the disbenefit side. It's all very well having a. So when can we have that early? So
the decision that you'll be asked to make will be in February next year. So we'll give you information in the draft business case to enable us to go and have a conversation with the community, and then we'll bring the two together, the detailed business case and the community feedback, back to you in February for a decision.
Okay. And the third question is $60 million for fixing the most important public transport corridor in the entire region seems pathetic. Why is the amount of money so little, and such you were struggling, to even pay for bus stops?
Yeah, I thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, that's really a question for your previous councils who adopted the LTP. If it helps, I think the urgency is because of the capacity issues on the Golden Mile, and you wanted to do something quick. Is that correct, Sam?
That's correct. I think that, it's been identified as one of our major pinch points for Wellington City, and to keep the traffic flowing. And I actually think there's another way of looking at it in terms of we actually can achieve a really good outcome with quite a small amount of money, which is a really positive thing. I mean, it's not the amount of money that we'd really like to have to provide the ultimate customer experience, but we can still achieve a good outcome with quite a small amount of money, which is positive.
Okay, can I go on the list?
Thanks very much. I noticed that the premise for a lot of these changes is a growing population, correct? So,
population growth, but also demand for bus patronage is increasing. Demand for buses is increasing, patronage is increasing. I think last March we had the highest volume of bus passengers ever. So it's becoming an incredibly desirable mode of transport in the city. So yes, population growth, but yes.
Yep, and that's great. So when do you think we're going to reach a point where it will stop growing, or the growth will actually start reducing? Because it seems if we're, your argument that more and more people catching buses, and I see that on the bus myself, is that at what stage do we actually see a levelling off of that? Do we have any projections for that, or any business case for that?
I think Councillor Chung's asking a population question. Yeah, and I think councillors, if you remember, through the spatial plan and the district plan we've adopted, we had a growth rate of 50 to 80,000 people. That was arranged because we knew that the market and the population profile of the city changes, and the nation, in fact, for a whole lot of reasons. And so at the moment we're sitting in the lower growth area, so in the early 50s. But every time we update our population projections, depending on immigration policy and a whole lot of other factors, those population projections generally go up. They have traditionally been quite low and conservative, and we get caught out with the growth that happens. So at this particular point in time, I think you should comfortably assume the city will keep growing. It's the pace in which is at question, and that is usually determined on external factors that impact the city. Sam?
If I could just add, I think another aspect of that is in terms of the time of use charging, and if we see that come in, we know that if time of use charging comes in, that the demand for public transport escalates immediately. So that wouldn't be a population, a population growth requirement for additional public transport. That's another factor.
That's right, yeah. So you've got three drivers there. You would know, Councillor, that the government is looking at time of use charging, but the other factor is population growth, and then of course is mode choice. So if it's easier simply to get in and faster and more convenient to get in via PT, people are choosing to do that instead of driving their private motor vehicles.
And just one last thing on that. In the February briefing which we gave around the Bus Priority Action Plan, that had all the analysis in it, looking forward to those growth projections for the public transport. So you can go into that briefing and look at the slide pack we gave you then, and there's lots of information about that, those sort of forecasts, and I think it was around a 10% increase we've seen the last year in bus patronage, despite not having population growth.
Okay, great, thanks. Now, have you confirmed, and so I'm sorry if I actually missed that part, but have you confirmed the number of people who are actually travelling through the CBD and not getting off the bus? So this data can actually be gotten from the snapper cards, I guess, but not alighting in the CBD or picking up from the CBD and going through?
I don't have the figures to hand, Councillor, but as Liam said in his introduction, we're talking about moving 70,000 people through the CBD. How many of those are alighting and boarding? I can't tell you, but I can certainly have a look and see if we can break that number down a little.
Okay. It seems to me to be critical that we actually understand that, because this is the whole reason for actually having it along the quays, isn't it? To actually move people faster through the city. Great, thank you.
Councillor O'Neill.
Kia ora. I just wondered if within the existing budget there are planned upgrades also to the road surfacing to account for higher volume of electric buses and heavier vehicles, or is the standard of the road good as?
There's no proposal to increase the quality of the road surface here. The infrastructure improvements are limited to what we require to make the stops safe and the shelters.
Cool. And then just a supplementary partai, because this is kind of a part of the state highway network, or provides benefit to the state highway network, is there any opportunity for funding from Waka Kotahi in the future, or are we super limited to just GW and Wellington Council?
For this stage, we're limited to the two councils' funding, and sadly NZTA don't do retrospective funding, but there could be opportunity in the future with a more advanced business case to go back and put money into the request through the National Land Transport Fund.
Councillor Calvert.
One of my questions was about population, and thank you, Vida, for pointing out a February one, but I wonder whether you could resend it, because we don't keep all that information in our heads, so that would be useful just to have that.
Yes, we can.
And anything else that would be good from officers that is going to feed into the business case come August, because it's important for us to get our heads around that rather than 5 days before we're debating the business case. Would be useful. But can I just query the population stats? I mean, are we still, because this is in our long-term plan as well, are we still relying on these stats of 50 to 80,000? I know we talked about it, and I know, Liam, you talked about, it is at the lower scale, but, the last census showed very little growth. And it just seems to me that we are predicating our plans still on something that, at least in this last few years, has proven not to be correct. So, and this gives rise to why do this piece of work right at this time if population numbers aren't actually growing. I know the bus usage may be up, so maybe, I know you've given us your view, but I would still like to understand that a bit better. Maybe not here, but I do want to see that because it's in the LTP as well. And there was one other thing, but I can't remember now what it is.
Councillor Paddock.
Thank you. Sam will know I was at the Regional Land Transport Committee this morning. Lots of talk about how only 1 in 5 trips is a work trip and lots of demand at the weekend. So will this help people get around at the weekend as well?
The Airport Express runs 7 days a week. As I say, we are looking at 7 days a week service along the waterfront, which wouldn't be the peak services that we're proposing. So no, stage 1 is about peak travel, but stage 2 that could follow on relatively soon, but would still need some extra investment, would increase that choice at weekends.
I think the point is that the weekend is now becoming a peak, if you look at the figures, yeah, so that's interesting. So when we get MRT, which we will, with the change in government, will this all be compatible with what's planned here? I didn't need the comments, I was asking a question.
I don't think I can possibly answer that question in detail for you, Councillor.
I don't.
Councillor Free.
No, I haven't finished. So you'd be able to be able to have space for MRT and buses and bikes? It's a theoretical question, not a political one.
I'll take that, Tamsin. I mean, I don't think we can answer it, is the short answer. It is a public transport spine, and what the future holds is to be determined by a future government and this council, no doubt. But it's not been designed into the profile of the peak time bus lane, if that's your question. It's not.
Perhaps I can, it does signal the shift that we do have it as a public transport spine. At the moment, it's not a public transport spine. And by establishing it and cementing it in place as a second spine, it enables that shift later perhaps to be a bit more seamless. But any thought of getting MRT, BRT through there would be a significant change in infrastructure.
Councillor Free.
What we do need is an excellent bus service. I'm reasonably supportive of this, but what I want to ask about is actually the bike lane. Paul, you'd mentioned it, but I wasn't quite clear. Is the intention to put that on the quays as well and to try and fit everything together?
I can quickly just comment that. So we're working through different options, but at the moment we do not see that there is room on the quays street itself. So we're looking at options to create a better bike facility along the waterfront on the Lady Elizabeth lane.
Okay, so some of those other little areas.
At the moment. Yeah.
I did have another question. It's gone out of my head.
Councillor
I'm really
Matthews.
sorry. Someone else.
I just wanted to double check my understanding because it was early on in the presentation, but my understanding is that there's numbers going down the Golden Mile to justify the second spine now.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks.
Councillor Randall.
Okay. I just want to clarify the cycleway thing too. So in terms of the bus lanes, the peak time bus lanes proposed, are cyclists going to be allowed to use them?
That's the proposal, that they're bus lanes, not bus-only lanes.
Yeah, so if what's the point of putting express buses on them if they're going to have a cycle in front of them?
As they can now in other bus lanes. So throughout the city we allow cycles to use our bus lanes. What we would hope to have here is a higher quality facility that encourages those on bikes to get off those lanes on the quays and move into an alternative high quality thing that serves their purpose, serves their need rather.
Okay. Have you done any work with accessibility groups in terms of checking out this proposal, and what do they say about the proposal?
Yep, we have a really strong accessibility voice in our public transport advisory group, and we have ongoing relationships with Blind and Low Vision New Zealand and other groups. Yeah, it would be fair to say that the general customer perception of how do I get across and to the stops on the corridor is a concern. So we have specifically been working with accessibility groups about what's required in terms of making that safe for them. Mainly, I think I'll just check with David, it'll be around signal times and crossing. So, yeah, we're absolutely aware of the need. What that looks through in the design is what will come through in the next month.
Yeah, Kia ora, Council. An initial review of the concept design's been undertaken by CCS Disability Action, and it's generally positive, with obvious comments about how we need to make sure that it is accessible through certain design features.
Yeah, so in terms of making sure it's safe for, say, disabled people, I feel that that's the wrong word, but people who are okay. So just in terms of that, can we get a confirmation that where they say there is a safety issue, or even if it's to do with the surface or outside of scope, that's going to go into scope because it needs to be addressed?
We're not going to be building something that's unsafe. I think that's what I can commit to today. What that looks like in terms of the detailed access around individual stops and so on, I can't comment at the moment, but that will come through in the design and the business case for you.
Yeah, so I just want more of an assurance that in terms of your priority,
yep,
that even though, so say for example, we talked about not fixing the road surface, but the road surface needs to be fixed so that people can have a smooth crossing or a safe crossing, yes, that goes into scope for safety.
Yes.
Okay. And the third question is, what's going to happen? This whole proposal is based on people walking further and crossing 6 lanes to take buses every day. What happens if people don't and they insist on just cramming onto the old Golden Mile buses?
What we're doing is the best we can with what we've got. We do know that that's a critical concern for us in terms of how do we change people's behaviour. As Paul said, starting the services in the summer is a good way of encouraging people to become familiar with that extra walk of 100 metres or whatever it is, becoming, finding their desired route to the stop that works for them. So we think that will build some of that early behaviour. Distance is an interesting thing. What feels like a long way to some people is nothing to others. So, as Paul said, there will always be a choice of services as well. So if people don't want to leave the Golden Mile, they can stay on those services. If they become sufficiently overloaded that we need to look at reviewing the services and the number of buses that we're providing and the frequency of services, we'll do that. But we do that as a matter of course anyway in our network reviewing and planning anyway.
Can I just add to that, Tamsin, that when you look actually about where people are dispersed across between the two routes, there's also a very large number of people that will find this route closer now because there's a lot of living and also a lot of workplaces Featherston side and east, it must be. So there may be a lot of people that also find it closer and easier. So, it's a bit of both, and we're also quite interested in seeing those side streets as well, and creating those flows of people between the Golden Mile and the Harbour Quays is going to create some really great opportunities for activating those side streets.
Okay, and I guess it's the big premise is that it has to be better. If it's not better than on the Golden Mile, people aren't going to walk over there. So if it is truly 6 minutes faster.
We've really got to cut down.
I just want to make one last comment, and that is amongst your plans.
No. Can we move on to the next person? Councillor Young, you can go back on the list.
I'll go on the list.
So we need to go on to
the Regional Council is the ultimate owner of the airport bus service, isn't it? So is anything being done about having a stop on Mount Victoria that local residents have been advocating for years, including, I believe, the current
Not really
chair.
a question about this. So do you have any other questions, Nicola?
I'm looking after your interests.
I know, but it's fair that you could do that in the copy. Deputy Mayor Foon.
Okay.
Just really quickly, and sorry if this was said, will we be consulting on the new bike route at the same time? And, yeah.
You got a nod, so that was yes.
That's a no.
Oh, it's a
Thank
no.
you.
Councillor Calvert.
In the new year.
So I'm just trying to do the maths. If it's going to take an extra 5 or 6 minutes for somebody to walk to the quays from, say, the Golden Mile, and we're offering them a bus ride that's 5 to 6 minutes quicker, what's the incentive?
I think, as Vida said, it all depends on where they're coming from.
Yeah, but if they're coming from the terrace or they're coming from around the Golden Mile,
then the faster journey time in terms of the total journey time is the incentive.
Okay, so when you bring us the business case, are you going to be able to show where people are roughly coming from? So the percentage of people that will actually benefit by this, as opposed to because you might say 50% work closer to the Harbour Quays side, the other 50% of potential patrons come from the other side. So will you be able in the business case to show roughly where people come from?
We've done some high-level catchment analysis as part of choosing where the stops are. It doesn't necessarily have the detail of how many people are in the office buildings that you're after, but there is an indication of where those people are likely to be focused.
Yeah.
That is in part of the business case.
Okay, so
Councillor, we've done that one.
yeah, but I just want to make sure that but they're going to address what I've just raised.
I think they said they are.
Is that right? You're going to be able to address what I've just raised?
I'm not sure we're going to. Just a reminder of officers, this is time for councillors to ask questions, okay? And we need to keep your responses really tight so we can maximise the time we have.
I just
Thank you.
Just want to point out two things. The express services we're putting there, the proposition is they're already faster, so that already attracts customers to them. So, and the other benefit in terms of attracting customers is those services that currently stop at Brandon Street will become express services that travel the length of the CBD rather than stop at one end. And we know from services like the Route 20, when we extend those services through the CBD, we get a significant increase in patronage.
I see where you're going, Councillor Calvert, but I'm not sure we'll provide that amount of detail for you. Back to you, Paul. And Route 2, can we start that shortly?
We've got last question, Councillor Randall.
Yeah, well, last question really is, can you consider, will it be part of the consideration to put in a rail shuttle for the CBD, given that we've got new ticketing systems coming as well, which hopefully we can have free interchange, but also that the rail passengers are overloading the number one bus route already in terms of they just go to the railway station and the bus travels only half full going over to Johnsonville and Newlands and that sort of thing. So can a dedicated rail shuttle go into the mix so that that is focused on getting people to the station and so that the rest of the bus network can operate without that burden?
I can't make any promises about specific services, Councillor, but as I say, we look constantly at the network loading, and I'm happy to take that away and have a look, but top of my head, doesn't feel like it's an option.
On to the next topic.
I'll quickly rattle through this one, partly because it's a much smaller scale project and partly because it's not quite so imminent. Route 2, for those who are not familiar, goes from Karori all the way out to Miramar and Seatoun. We break it down in terms of the improvements we need to make on this route to increase the capacity into stage 1, which is essentially the Karori end of the route, and stage 2, which is the Miramar Seatoun end of the route. It is the busiest route on the whole network. It's full, there is a lot of overloading, a lot of overcrowding, and we need to do something about increasing capacity on this. Similarly to the capacity issues we were just talking about for the Golden Mile, it's not just a case of putting more buses in there of the same type of bus that will create further congestion and as with the Golden Mile, make it difficult to maintain our reliability and frequency of services. So what we've talked about previously with you is the 5 articulated buses, which will be operating between Courtney Place and Karori towards the end of late 2026. Those will be peak capacity in addition to the existing services. The point, of course, about articulated buses is that they increase the capacity without adding the extra vehicles. The Karori Connections project has done quite a lot of the improvements to enable articulated buses to move safely along the corridor. There are half a dozen or so still in progress, but will be completed by the time the buses are on that route. In stage 2, the full route out to Miramar and Seatoun, essentially there's a lot of minor improvements required. So this is about adjustments to stops. I think there are 3 corners that need easing so that buses can get round them. Possibly some rationalising of bus stops to put the longer stops that are required in the right places. So there's 46 sets of stops to be reviewed on that whole second half of the route. So we're just about to start on design for that stage, so we'll really have a better understanding of exactly what the changes are that are required. So currently finishing the Karori to City stage, as I said. So there's a traffic resolution for the changes coming to you at the end of August, with the expectation we do the construction early in 2026. And stage 2, as I say, we're just about to start the design. That was predominantly what we tested when we brought the articulated bus down from Auckland to take it out on the route and see where we needed it. So it was a stop-by-stop, corner-by-corner test of what was required. Expectation is that we'll be able to go out for consultation on that one in November and bring it back to whatever form the regulatory committee takes after the elections in February. And again, construction, because it is a relatively low level of construction, it's stop by stop, curbs and shelters and so on. It's not a major project. It will be a lot of minor projects, so there will need to be some careful engagement with the community. But again, construction expected to be completed by the middle of next year.
Thanks for that, Tamsin. As you know, my interest is in bus stops. So you haven't decided the 46 are the whole of the number 2 route, or are they just the Karori?
Just the Courtney Place to Miramar Seatoun.
What about the Karori to Central City? How many there?
Not sure how many are on that section, but there's no further changes other than enlarging of some stops still to happen.
So you're not removing any in that part of the route?
No.
Oh, okay, so it's the 46 there. So is it possible for councillors to have some, to have some involvement in that process, because it is contentious that people are wanting to have easy access to bus stops?
Yep, and as I say, there will be a consultation stage. Any changes will require traffic resolution, so they will need to come back through council.
I mean, before that, will we be able to have a workshop or some discussions?
We're not ready at that point to put that detail in front of you at the moment. We're just starting on the design right now, but happy to look at how we can come back to council with the information as we go.
And see if we can do a ward councillor briefing at some point.
Yeah, and just...
I know you're all really busy and things, but see what we can do in the time before going up for consultation.
Not too busy for this. It was just the particularly minor details, but important in our community. The thing that, we've talked about, the Pīpiri Broome, that's a tricky intersection, so that would be good. Thank you.
My number 1 question is, how are you going to turn your articulated buses round at Courtney Place? Because you said it's going from Karori to Courtney Place.
Go around the block.
Oh, okay. Which block?
I don't know off the top of my head, Councillor, but it's not about doing a U-turn on Courtney Place.
No.
You move buses on the network so that they then return.
Okay, and they turn at, all right, at the Koori end, I suppose. Okay, this is going to cost quite a lot of money to change a lot of bus stops and what have you on the Seatoon section. How is that going to be funded when, if it weren't for the fact that we're getting bigger buses, the city wouldn't have to do it?
It's again 50-50 funded, so the $16 million that Liam spoke about is the total for the Golden Mile Harbour Quays project and the Route 2 project. So there's a $6 million budget funded 50-50, $3 million each.
It's not going to go very far though, is it?
Which is why we're only talking about a limited amount of investment to improve stops.
The $6 million for the number 2.
Yeah, just for clarity, sorry, Chairman, here I am over speaking as officer, but if you recall the LTP, we had quite a significant sum in there previously at the beginning of the last LTP process, and for obvious reasons that was whittled down to the current sum. I think that figure was about 50 million for both projects, and that's where we arrived on the 16. You asked us to go back and sharpen the pencil on something lighter and faster, and this is what we came back with. Sorry about that.
Councillor Young. Councillor Chung.
Thank you. I have 2 questions. The number 2 bus route, you're telling us that it's the busiest route on the network. So whereabouts is it actually the busiest? Like, because it runs at a 10-minute frequency, so is it actually just between the CBD to Karori, or where are the busy periods?
It's also very busy on the eastern end.
So it's busy all throughout the whole network?
The whole route, yep.
Okay, great, thank you.
Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you. I just wondered if delays to other city streets and cycle programs, it wouldn't make sense to change the road a bunch and then have to redo it later. So I wondered how it's going to be factored in other future improvements that are, still pretty close by.
I can talk to this. So one of the decisions that you made, I think back in December, was that as we're doing this package of projects, which was decided through the LTP amendment, which was the reduced package, which Liam just spoke about, including the Central City projects, we are trying to understand the network effects and then understand the sequencing as well, so that we can reduce that construction disruption and also make sure that we're not coming back multiple times to the same places. So it is a piece of work that we're doing. Don't have the answer yet, but it's one of the things that we're looking and working really hard to make as least disruptive as possible.
Thank you. Just supplementary to that, can we expect through the public consultation period then, I'm thinking bike lanes on Moxamap, can we expect that conversation to also be about bike lanes, or is that yet to be?
No, that's not, I can't quite remember when that's scheduled for, but that's been pushed out as well with going from a 10-year delivery to a 20-year delivery of our bike network.
Okay.
Councillor Calvert.
This is coming into Karori, but I noticed the timeline. You're going to notify us on the 2nd of July, and you're going to go out to consultation on the 11th of July. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Why can't you notify us now? Can you tell? I mean, because this is the last week before we go into recess, so just wondering why you can't provide us with the information now.
Certainly we can advise councillors, but the stakeholders, I think there's quite a process already organised to notify stakeholders, but we'll have those plans. We can circulate them.
If you could get them before the end of this week, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, they're currently being reviewed by Brad's transport team, but they're all ready, so we should be able to send them through.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Councillor Paddock.
Tamsin, as you know, I'm worried about parking for different reasons to some of my colleagues. On the Pīpiri Street bus side, are we going to be able to remove it? And also, are we going to be able to slow the buses down? I think they go way too fast at some parts on the number 2 route.
Noted.
Councillor Thank you. If this is going to come to our Regs Committee on the whatever of August, 28th of August, this is the Karori to the city part. I would like, please, to know how it's going to turn, how the bus is going to turn, and I'd like that to be part of the consultation and explanation to the public. I imagine it will come onto Cambridge or Kent Terrace and turn that way, but can we please be really explicit about how it's going to work? Thank you.
That's all the questions, so we're back to you guys. Or have you finished? Well, that's it. Finished? Perfect.
Oh, there you go.
Great, thank you very much. That was great.
Councillors, and thank you, councillors, for all your very interesting and in-depth questions. Thanks to the Greater Wellington team for turning up today. As you know, there's a 26th of June briefing, so in a couple of days at Greater Wellington Regional Council. As per usual, any questions, any afterthoughts on what you've heard today, please just email the team, Tamsin or Paul, or give me a ring and I can get that information to you as much as I possibly can. I've got a couple of follow-ups, one on Kate Shepherd Place and a few others which I've been emailing. So, yeah, please keep communicating and we'll see you back for in August, I believe, for the Thorn and Quay, at Harbour Quay, sorry.
Can I just say that I'm very disappointed that our council didn't get to go on that bus that came, that articulated bus. Then we would have a much better understanding of its performance through the city. But for some reason we weren't invited.
Well, yeah, we have passed that feedback on already, Sarah, to the Greater Wellington Regional Council. But thanks again. All right.
So, councillors, we're back at 3:30. We may be able to start a little bit earlier, but we have got some external guests coming, so.